Hypothetical. Biden and Trump both die of natural causes before the election. What happens? Since Biden is currently president, VP Kamala Harris would take over until the election is sorted out and the new president is elected. An endless profusion of conspiracy theories, among other, possibly even less desirable consequences. Satan's little wizard gets a visit from the Secret Service. Simple, we all go to the Winchester, have a nice cold pint, and wait for all of this to blow over. We all agree to let Dolly Parton take over. I'll buy a round for the whole bar. Well, at least the gerontocracy takes a breather. Seriously, stop electing people in their 70s and 80s. There's no reason to. And there was much rejoicing in the land. Monty Python cheers. You have to destroy Trump's other 6 Horcruxes. I would not want to wish death on anyone, but to answer your question. What happens? Nationally, 2 new candidates who are hopefully under the age of 70. What happens? Personally, I would be relieved. Without frontrunners, both Democrats and Republicans scramble to find someone. Kamala versus Nikki is a possibility, but Kamala would more than likely win in this chaos. Keep in mind that in a Republican primary, Nikki literally lost to none of these candidates in a state. It took the phrase, "nobody can beat us" to a whole new meaning, because nobody really did beat her. I would immediately believe in a god again. Kamala and Nikki make it to the finals and India is well represented. Depends on when this happens. Everyone's saying it'll be Nikki Haley for the R's. And yeah, it probably would be, but factor a couple more months of her going after Trump and him throwing shit all over her, I think that would cause a schism in the GOP that may let Harris eke out a victory. If it was Harris v. Haley today, I'd bet on Haley. If it was Harris v. Haley after, say, August, 50-50, I'm not putting money on either. America wins. Indian political win. Kamala v. Nikki. If a president dies, the VP becomes president. If the VP dies, the Speaker of the House becomes president. If the Speaker of the House dies, the President pro tempore of the Senate becomes president. If the President pro tempore of the Senate dies, the Secretary of State becomes president. If the Secretary of State dies, the Secretary of the Treasury becomes president. If the Secretary of the Treasury dies, the Secretary of Defense becomes president. If the Secretary of Defense dies, the Attorney General becomes president. If the Attorney General dies, the Secretary of the Interior becomes president. If the Secretary of the Interior dies, Secretary of Agriculture becomes president. If the Secretary of Agriculture dies, the Secretary of Commerce becomes president. If the Secretary of Commerce dies, the Secretary of Labor becomes president. If the Secretary of Labor dies, the Secretary of Health and Human Services becomes president. If the Secretary of Health and Human Services dies, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development becomes president. If the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development dies, the Secretary of Transportation becomes president. If the Secretary of Transportation dies, the Secretary of Energy becomes president. If the Secretary of Energy dies, the Secretary of Education becomes president. If the Secretary of Education dies, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs becomes president. If the Secretary of Veterans Affairs dies, the Secretary of Homeland Security becomes president. If the Secretary of Homeland Security dies, we have no president. Maybe we get someone I actually want to vote for. Both sides celebrate, and we take another crack at this. Wow buddy, what a way to get on the Secret Service call list.